But Kinder Morgan is, if not the, one of the largest energy infrastructure companies in North America. We have over 84,000 miles of pipelines that we deal with. The vast majority, are in Maximo, primarily for compliance. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go along, and that's really why I like to focus on compliance, because that's really what our current management is focusing on when we do utilize Maximo. We are on 7605 right now. We're kind of at the bleeding edge. We found as we go, we went to 7604 about a month and a half ago, and we had some issues with 7604 that required us to go to 7605 as soon as we could. And so about 2 weeks ago, we went to 7605. And we're waiting for 7606. There's some other things that definitely we'd like to see fixed that we found out about kind of after we did some testing, and some of it after we went live. But it's been pretty good overall. I think we've seen a few performance issues with the start centers in 7.6 versus what we had in 7.5. That's something we've had to work on quite a bit over the last month or so. Okay. Okay, so what I'm actually got for this presentation is, first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we set up Maximo to be able to basically do compliance. So we would know, our field personnel, our management would know, what is the drop dead date for all of our tasks? We really, that's one of the things that we really wanted to solve when we started developing and doing some configuration of Maximo. We really wanted to say, how do we communicate a drop dead date? How do we let them know, when they're going to be out of compliance? Not just a target date, not just a scheduled date, but really what is our compliance date? And, we call that our NTE, or our not to exceed date, or our drop dead date, whichever way you want to go. We really focused on that, over the years. We had, everyone's had layoffs and reduced staff, and so with reduced staff, we want to make sure that critical work didn't fall through the crack, and they knew when it has to be done by. Okay, some of the things, and I'll preface this with, especially with Russell in the room back there. I do know that some of the oil and gas, we are using base Maximo, so we're not using the oil and gas solution. I know the oil and gas solution has some regulatory type additions. I haven't looked at the latest, what it has right now, but I know we implemented this a while back, and so we've made some changes by just configuring Maximo to do some of the things, I guess, that the oil and gas module will do in the regulatory side. So again, I definitely have to preface that this is on base Maximo. But as I mentioned, out of the box, Maximo has target dates, scheduled dates, actual dates, but really not a drop dead date. So we wanted to have Maximo come up with kind of a calculated and or fixed compliance date, basically. Some of our, as you know, some of the regulatory, especially PHMSA, you've got certain same calendar year requirements. You have to do valve inspections once per year, not to exceed 15 months. So we want to be able to do all of that in Maximo, set it up, let it tell people what's your drop dead date. And so that's what I'm going to kind of show you in the next few slides. The other thing, I guess the last bullet on that previous slide was something. It was something called what we call a fixed compliance date. You have certain, reporting to the government or other type reporting where you have a certain fixed date every year, fixed date every month, things like that. maybe your fire extinguisher inspections, they can be done anytime during the month, but your drop dead date is the end of the month. So we use what's called a fixed compliance date for that. Now, I've got some definitions and some other things that'll walk through that a little bit. But needless to say, just some examples of the external regulatory agencies we have would be PHMSA, the DOT for your vehicles, EPA, OSHA, the FCC, Federal Communication Commission. We don't have any offshore anymore, so we used to have the MMS a lot more than we do now, but we have tons of state agencies, environmental agencies, and things like that we have to manage. And there's also our company policy and our procedure manual. So what we've really done is, again, this is just a partial list of the requirements, but what we've tried to do is document, which external regulatory agency requires this, or which manual requires this, and kind of what high-level policy it requires. And I'll show you, we've added some fields that'll do that. So what we've done is we've added some extra fields under, and one of the things that we've done to our PM screen, that I know they were showing, some of the other sessions were showing the PM screen, and it might be a little small, a little fuzzy, but what we've ended up doing is we actually kind of put most of our time-based frequency information on the main PM tab, so that we don't have to go back and forth between the frequency tab and the main PM tab. So what we've ended up doing here at the top is under time-based, for example, and again it's a little fuzzy, but time-based, this is an annual inspection, so frequency is 1 year. The not to exceed frequency would be 15 months here, so you've got your 3-month grace period, and so it uses that to calculate. In addition, we have these other two fields we added down here for same calendar year and same calendar month. The same calendar month's really not a regulatory requirement. That's more, a lot of our measurement inspections, some of our internal company manuals say, well, we have to do this once per calendar month, not to exceed 45 days, or once per every 2 months, not to exceed 75 days, but by the end of the second month. So we added both a same calendar year and a same calendar month checkbox, and that, along with the NTE frequency and the fixed compliance date, are all used to calculate this drop dead date, which you'll see shows up as the NTE compliance date once it's calculated. And this is on the PM screen. I've got another slide, it'll be the work order screen. Again, we've used extra fields in the database, and that will help identify. We've also, as I mentioned, we have an agency reference, a manual reference, and a policy reference. So this is a PHMSA activity and in part of our O&M manual, and it's in section 310 of our O&M manual. So it kind of helps us identify where we're at on that. As far as on the work order, we see all three of those agency manual and policy fields, and we also next to the target date, the scheduled date, the actual date, right below it, we have the compliance date, and that'll let them know that the target date, maybe it came out early in March in this case, but they really they won't be out of compliance unless they complete it beyond the 15 months in that case, which would have been August 14th. You want them to try to get it done closer to your target date, but at least you know that you're not out of compliance if you get it done a little bit later. And so that's something that they have to look at. For corrective maintenance, manually generated work orders, we allow our users to populate a compliance date on that particular work. Let's just say you have a follow-up work order, maybe you had an inspection and you have something that has to be fixed within 6 months or a year. You can give it a NTE date so that way it'll show up as a compliance date. But once either it's been generated by a PM or someone has manually entered that date it cannot be changed other than by one of the administrators or basically our super users, who are allowed to kind of go through a little selected action to update the compliance date if needed. But it's very controlled as to who can do that. So let's see what else we got on here. I'll talk about. So again, in most cases, the compliance date is going to be carried over from the PM. It'll be based upon their last completion or based upon how the PM is set up. And the other thing, I guess I mentioned on the last bullet here, one of the things that we had to do, because on some of the monthly, bi-monthly, and quarterly, if you're not careful, you might have more than one work order that ends up coming out for that particular PM. And maybe if they're getting close to the end of the period and your next work order has already generated, well, if you're looking at it compared to your last completion date, they'll both have the same compliance date. So what we do is on a nightly basis, actually I think it's hourly. It's an hourly basis. We actually have a little program that goes out there and says, okay, if it's monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly, and you have only one work order open for that PM, go back to the PM and get the compliance date that's on the PM and make sure that work order matches it. And so that way it calculates it and it keeps everything in sync. The reason we do that, as I just mentioned, if you have two work orders, they both generated, as long as you complete the earlier one first, the next one, it needs to be updated for the new compliance date based upon that correct last completion date. All right, so one of the things I did about, a few years ago, we were merging, we've had a few mergers over the years, but we were kind of working together with another part of the company. We had actually had the company I came from, when we merged with another company, we wanted to make sure we were utilizing Maximo the same way. So I created kind of what I call a PM manual, and came up with a lot of definitions like this for all of these extra fields, all of these fields, so to make sure that we're all on the same page as to how we were using it. So this is just an example of a couple of slides from that manual. So what I ended up doing is, again, documenting kind of what the compliance date means, and things like that, and then, not to exceed frequency. We get some people get confused occasionally, and in the not to exceed frequency, they'll say, well, we have a grace period of 3 months. They might put 3 months instead of 15 months, but we've kind of, we have warning reports that kind of lets us know if they do something like that. But we want to make sure that, my job, as I'm kind of the overall, from the business side, Maximo administrator for the pipeline, the natural gas unit at Kinder Morgan. So, part of my job is to ensure that people stay out of trouble. They don't, hurt themselves by setting up PMs incorrectly. And so that's one of the things I do is myself, and I've got a contractor who once or twice a month will review some exception reports. I'll talk about that, I think, on the slide a little bit later. That kind of helps identify any of those potential issues in the way the PMs are set up to make sure that things are calculated correctly. Okay. Now I talked a little bit about the same calendar year, same calendar month already. So this just talks a little bit more about what that is, just some examples of the definitions. And fixed compliance date, again, as I mentioned, that could be at the end of the week, end of the month, end of the quarter. It's basically, it could be just a fixed date where it's not actually based upon the last time it was completed, but it's actually based upon a hard and fast compliance date. You'll see that again a lot on your required reporting to the government and things like that. What our IT group did is they actually did some Java class updates on the PM application, because the compliance day calculations can get very, very complicated. When we originally did this, we really did a lot of scenarios, we did a lot of testing to make sure that all the calculations were coming up with the correct date. So it was fairly complicated to do, but we really feel like we're doing a service to the organization by letting them know, this is your drop dead date, and for reporting to management and everything, we can easily identify, where people are coming in late, or hopefully minimize the late work orders. And again, as I mentioned, we do some. We have some automated scripts that clean up certain things, and we have other items where we will run some exception reports that we'll go ahead and review. And that's kind of what this is saying, really. We have the 90 fixed scripts that clean up certain things, and then we do those coding errors, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, and part of that manual I mentioned earlier was, we give them some guidelines when they set up certain type PMs. We give them some guidelines. Okay, for an annual PHMSA PM, then typically we will recommend, using target startup node. So it's based upon the last completion year. It's an annual, not to exceed 15 months. And it's required that you do it the same calendar year, and then it'll be 30 days before the anniversary when the work order would come out. That would be the lead time. That's just an example that we show people, and we have some for the different types of inspections. Okay, the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about some newer things that we've done. Once we've gotten out of Maximo 4 up to Maximo 6 and 7, we decided to make a few changes. In addition, we wanted to try to utilize master PMs to help set up PMs easier, make them more consistent. And so that's the next couple of slides. We'll talk a little bit about that. And this, again, this is small, you won't be able to read it, but bottom line, what we ended up doing is, for a lot of our job plans that are for regulatory type items, for our O&M manual, the way Kinder Morgan works is we have an O&M manual, and then within that O&M manual is an I&M listing, basically. The I&M, inspection and maintenance activities. For all the recurring type activities, we have a list of I&Ms which we've converted to kind of a spreadsheet, which in effect is a PM template. And that PM template basically identifies some of the examples I showed earlier about how you would set up a PM in Maximo for that particular requirement. But the other thing that we've done is, so these job plans, for example, for a fire extinguisher inspection, we would have a job plan, an I&M, that would be 0111.00. And what we've ended up doing, instead of having all those steps in tasks, we really aren't completing each task in Maximo. We're just basically saying, this is your list of steps that you do when you do an inspection. We put it into the long description. That'll still show up on any of the reports. It'll go over to the work order when it gets created. But in Maximo 6 and 7, if you have 20 or 30 tasks, then when you create one work order, it creates 30 work orders. And so we're trying to reduce the number of work orders in our work order table. So unless we have to do documentation for a particular task, then we'll have the list of steps, or the checklist, in effect, in the long description, and then we'll reserve the tasks for where we want to document an as left, as found, or whether or not a valve was operated. Things like that will remain as a task, but everything else pretty much either goes into what we have as a long description, or our IT guy also created something called a work order checklist, which is very similar to this. It's just another field kind of in Maximo that'll be kind of a checklist. So it's similar to long description, but a little bit different. And then the other thing we've done, in this case, this is again for fire extinguishers, we create a master PM that has our frequencies, but in addition to frequencies, it'll have our NTE, it'll have our agency manual and policy, and just the basic, a lot of the things that are in the spreadsheet I just mentioned, our INM spreadsheet, it actually shows up in the master PM, so that when we create a new PM, we can use the master, and it'll populate, 8 or 10 of the fields on the PM, and minimize, what has to be manually entered when creating a PM. We do not, at this point, we really aren't using the master PMs to actually go out and create a bunch of PMs. We're doing it kind of on a one-by-one basis, and we're really not using it to update the PMs for the most part, other than we will do it via scripts and or load files, using the master PM as kind of a way to gather information about what might need to be changed. We're not really automating that because we have because of the calculation and the compliance fields that we've added, we really want to be kind of real careful when we make those kind of changes. We just don't want to blow out changes to thousands of PMs. So anyway, that's just one way of using master PMs. We started working on this probably 2 years ago with kind of enhancing our usage, or actually starting to utilize master PMs, and we really over the past 6-9 months or so, we really have really started using that quite a bit. The last piece I'll talk in the first section of my presentation is really, some of the reporting. Again, Ken and Morgan, our focus again is on compliance and compliance reporting. So we have reports that I run at different times during the month, and then I report to management at certain points during the month. Basically, it's kind of what are our completed exceptions, work orders that were completed late in effect? What are our uncompleted exceptions, work orders that should have been completed by the end of the month, but they haven't been completed yet for one reason or another? And we have kind of a compliance summary, which is, that was a pre-existing report before Kinder Morgan kept Maximo. I was originally with El Paso Corporation up until about 4 years ago when Kinder Morgan bought us. We had Maximo. I've been, again, working with Maximo for close to 20 years total. And but when Kinder Morgan bought us, it took them a while to decide, are we going to keep Maximo, or are we going to do something else? They had a couple of other systems prior to that. We did end up basically putting all of our pretty much all of our business units on Maximo at a minimum for compliance. But they had some existing reports that looked a lot like this, where basically it had, okay, what are our tasks completed? What are our tasks, completed current month and year to date? How many do we have open, that are open exceptions, closed exceptions, things like that. So it's kind of just a summary by business unit, I believe, is what the main breakout, so that our business unit VPs and presidents can have a discussion on a monthly basis of, okay, how's my business unit doing as far as compliance, so they can, have meetings and discuss that. So we do some summary reports like that. In addition, just basic Excel list reports of uncompleted exceptions and completed exceptions. I mentioned that our focus is on compliance, and what we end up doing with our work types is we ended up having 2 primary work types for our required work. RE is for regulatory, and CP is for company policy. We still use OP for operations, we have PD for predictive and things like that, but if it's not CP or RE, then it's considered not in a lot of these reports I run. It's kind of other work that you can still manage in Maximo, but not necessarily going to get reported to management. So it lets them use Maximo for other things that, you know, won't get them in trouble if they don't get it done. Bottom line. Okay. All right. So that was the kind of the first piece, was just kind of what have we done to manage compliance. Now we're going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit more on this one. Kind of the ways to document data in Maximo, and if we have time, you know, towards the end, we can talk. We can see if any of y'all have other questions or other ways that you're managing and documenting data in Maximo. We really, you know, don't do a ton of it, but we are starting to do more, particularly for valve inspections and you know, regulatory type things like that. Okay, so, you know, originally, again, this part of the presentation at one of the MUD conferences was actually more of a kind of a discussion and not necessarily just me talking to everyone. But I'll kind of go through this and explain some of the things, that some of the examples. I've got some different slides that'll be for each of these choices, I guess. You know, there's different ways to document work for compliance. I mean, one way is just, you know, the technician who did the work, he completes the work order. You know, another one, and he doesn't, all he does is completes it, he says what day they did it, and that's really his documentation. And for some cases, that's all you need. There's other cases where you really do need to document other things, and we'll talk about that in a couple other slides. You know, the other things you can do is, again, expose extra fields on the work order table. Originally, we had a remarks field. You can utilize cloned applications in some cases. We actually, for one of our business units, utilized the survey or inspection tab. So we added kind of an extra tab onto Maximo. And then we have other, you know, in another case, really the more out of the box way is to utilize your job plans in the actuals tab. And that's one of the things that we're doing. We're really not using the measurement values. That requires quite a bit of additional setup, but we are basically entering observations on the actuals for selected activities. So the first one I talked about was when the technician completes the work order. You know, we know that really, if you're really utilizing Maximo and you really you know, want to capture information, then you want them to put a little bit more information than just the completion date. However, in some cases, that's all that's really required. You know, one of the things, if all your technicians are going to be completing work orders, then you have to have the licenses available. And I guess it's a lot better now with the express licenses can be, you know, don't have to be named licenses. They can be concurrent, so that helps a lot. But again, it's simple. You can have the technician complete the work order, and you have to determine for your business need, you know, what else, if anything, they need to fill in besides just the completion date. And definitely, they need to, you know, if you're managing time or you're using Maximo for managing your labor time and all that, then you definitely have to have them do that. But if you're not, then just completing the work order, and in some cases, may work. The other case is really, again, using a long description or remarks field, something to document your required responses. That's not real consistent. It's not really easy to report on, but it is a way of doing that. Again, I've already kind of mentioned the survey tab. We've kind of done that. I don't think I didn't put a copy of that, but again, it's one of our other business units that has done that. But, you know, I guess one of the things that we did in the remarks field, the reason I say a remarks field there, I know now there's a log tab and you can actually put some information in the log tab. We originally set up an extra field on the work orders called remarks before the log tab was available. And that's really a good place for people to sometimes just document things of what they did. What I usually tell people, when you're creating a work order, or when you have a work order, your long description of the actual work order is kind of what needs to be done, and your job plan, and then your remarks would be kind of what did I do, what do I need to keep what information do I need to keep from what I did when I completed the work order. And so that's where you have to really identify what's important for people to document. But you want to be a lot more consistent. So what we really ended up doing in the last, especially in the last year, is doing a lot more of utilizing the job plans and having inner observations in the job plan steps when they're completing it on the actuals tab, I should say. And this was, we had some audits, I guess, last year, in the last couple of years, and we found that people weren't necessarily capturing for two of our main inspections, like our valve inspections and our some of our relief valve and regulator inspections, we weren't necessarily capturing the as left and as found, or for pipeline valve, mainline valve inspections, whether or not it was operated during the inspection or not. And those were things the PHMSA auditor really wanted to see, for every inspection. So what we've done, this year is we've made that a requirement that they can't complete the work order unless they put some information on the actuals tab in the observation field for all work orders that are tied to certain job plans that we have. And I think I've got a slide that might be hard to see a little bit, but what we ended up doing this is actually on the work order. Okay, on the work order under the actuals tab, we had these two steps here, basically document as found, set point in the observation column, and document as left, set point in the observation column. We added an extra field to the task and to the job plan that says this is a required field. And so we put logic in the work order completion process that will not, and also the note here that it puts a note here that observations are required on the actuals tab. And so on here, there's a yes here. If they don't put something in those fields, then it will not allow them to complete the work order. So that's one of the things that we did in the last year to kind of prevent some of this minimal documentation that they were doing. And again, how we got, never mind. I talked about the remarks field earlier. This is how our work order looks. The top of our work order is just the top portion of our work order. This is kind of how it looks right now, with just an extra remarks field where people can add additional information about what they had. The other thing we've done for our corporate reporting is we have a regulatory exception field and exception comments. So if it is a CP or an RE work order and they complete it late, they are required to put in an exception comment. Why was it late? Why did you, was there, a problem with getting access to the landowner or whatever? They can actually, in some cases we've had it where they have to do a vehicle inspection, but the vehicle was in the shop or something like that. So they could document that in exception comments, and that shows up on our reports to management. The regulatory exception, it allows us to exclude certain late activities on the reports to senior management. If it's something that's more of a company policy, that's not necessarily something that would be auditable by the regulatory agency, something that management is not quite as concerned about, then we would be able to put a note here in the regulatory exception, which would allow it to be excluded from our reports to management. One of the things that we do here is, you have to kind of keep in mind that, when you're going to get audited, what kind of reports do you show auditors? You really, typically, you aren't going to show your auditor Maximo itself. You're going to either show summary reports, or you might show individual work orders and files, but typically the auditor won't look at Maximo directly, definitely. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind. This is more of you know, if we all think about, you know, what types of reports do you create to show the auditors, or, you know, what kind of paper files do you keep, things like that. We had one of our compliance engineers up in the Northeast did a really good job. What he would do is he had like a little SharePoint page, and at the end of every basically season when they did their inspections, he would pull Maximo reports, put them all in a PDF format, put them out on his SharePoint file for each district or each operating area that he was in charge of. And so he could always just pull that up right away and show, you know, and pull it up for the auditor. And so he had worked with me to specifically create the reports the way he wanted them, so that when he could run those reports, he could just get them PDF, and he was in good shape. So, you know, I wish all of our, you know, areas and divisions had, you know, people like that who really control, kind of get a good idea of what's going on, and are kind of looking ahead as to what's going to happen. That definitely makes the audits run a whole lot smoother. Okay, well that's really the slides I have. We'll take some questions. If anyone has comments on how they're doing things like that, we have probably 15 minutes or so for questions and other things. So I'm going to be opening it up to questions or other comments. Anyone else want to talk about how they're doing their compliance?
I got a couple questions.
Sure.
I guess one would be, what do you do with all the associated documentation that goes with a valve inspection? Or, I mean, you know, do you have to provide procedures used, or any kind of, I mean, for certain regulatory requirements, any kind of documents that go with that? Did you store those at Maximo?
We do have linked documents. We do have linked documents. I mean, the job plan has the high level steps, kind of the high level procedure, not real super detailed, but the high level procedure. So that would be part of the work order. If they have forms that they filled out that are not, you know, the basic like as found, things like that, then yes, they can attach that. If they're not filing it at a location, then they can attach it, you know, to their work order. So,
and to the point of when you're talking about your engineer that is printing a report, I'm assuming that's kind of listing of work orders and kind of things that were done for that period. Is that strictly saved to SharePoint just so that they don't have to go back into Maximo and run that?
right, yeah.
An auditor asking for something.
Kind of I think what he does, he runs the report, and he'll kind of compare the dates and other information coming out of the report to what either other information he has either on paper or at the location, to make sure that it's synced up, and any details they have are synced up. So once he gets a good final report and he makes any corrections to Maximo, and he runs that final, so yeah, he doesn't have to go back to Maximo at that point in time. And if he has an audit, he just goes to his SharePoint and says, okay, for that year, for that type of inspection, for that area, I've got a report here that I can just hand the auditor. Sir?
I was wondering if you all considered using meters to capture like observations, or why you chose tasks.
Main reason is all the upfront setup. I mean, when on the actual tab, in order to be able to put meters and have, you know, things with that, you have to have all the different combinations of assets, and you know, it's just a lot of upfront setup. So we really, you know, we've got thousands and thousands of valves, thousands and thousands of regulators and all that, and, you know, with 80,000 miles of pipe, it would be a lot of condition monitoring points that would be required to be able to use the meter field, you know, on the actuals.
So, I'll go first. So when you put in your tasks, is there a template that, you know, because the valve inspections have 20 different things that you gotta check, at least for us, I'm assuming it's the same. Do you have to go one by one, or is there like a task, you know, like meters, as you mentioned, because that's what we were looking at, is meters have a meter group that you can just assign, and all automatically, every one of them gets a meter group, and you're done, you know, basically. It's kind of like a master PM notes, everything is in there, but is task similar, or do you have to basically do one by one individually for every asset?
Well, you'd have a PM for every asset, yeah. I mean, you would have you would want to be able to identify the actual completion date for each valve, each relief valve. So we're gonna have a PM for each, whether it could be parent-child. We could say, well, we've got 10 valves in this particular segment of the pipeline. They're all done on the same day or all done, in the same week or whatever. So we're gonna have a parent-child relationship for those valves. But we want a separate work order for each one so that we can identify the specific completion date and then calculate the compliance date for the next year once it's inspected. Sorry.
I was gonna ask if you use any mobility, the guys in the field use any mobile solutions or?
We had at one time, but at this point we're not. No, we don't have any mobile solutions
Do they
today.
have laptops or they just come back?
Combination, yeah. A lot of them have laptops and some go back to the office and complete them at the end of the week or whatever, yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of our, especially our measurement technicians and, some of our roving technicians, they definitely have laptops and they can complete them from home, when they get back home or get back to an office, but yeah, we've thought about it, and we did have a solution when we were under Maximo 4, but when we upgraded to 7, we never got it re-implemented, and we had a merger, and our current company hadn't made that a priority. Sir?
Great presentation. I'm with Plains. We're kind of going through this right now. We've got on the documentation side, we've got one side that's saying